My parents raged that I bought a home because they already promised it to my brother's family. I'm 31 and have been working as a graphic designer for the past 8 years. It's not the most lucrative career, but I've always been careful with money. I've packed lunches instead of eating out, tracked every expense in a budgeting app, and put aside a small portion of each paycheck for my future home. After years of living in cramped apartments with roommates and enduring noisy neighbors, I was finally ready to buy my own place. The housing market in my area is brutal. Houses get multiple offers within days of listing, often going for well above asking price. I'd been searching for months, missing out on a dozen houses, despite offering at or above asking price each time. It was exhausting and demoralizing, especially when I'd get my hopes up about a place only to have it snatched away. Then I found it, a modest 3-bedroom house in a nice area with good schools nearby. It needed some cosmetic updates. The kitchen was straight out of the 90s, but the bones were good, and the inspector didn't find any major issues. I put in an offer the same day I saw it, going $15,000 over asking price to beat out other potential buyers. When my realtor called to tell me my offer had been accepted, I literally cried with joy. The day after closing, I posted a photo of myself holding the keys in front of my new front door on social media. After years of saving and months of searching, I finally have a place to call my own. #first-time homeowner, #dream come true. Within minutes, my phone was ringing. It was my mom. "I just saw your post," she said, her voice oddly flat. "You bought a house?" "Yes," I replied, still riding the high of my achievement. "I've been looking for months. I was going to tell you guys this weekend when I came over for dinner." There was a long pause. "Your father wants to speak with you," she said finally. Then my dad was on the line. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded without preamble. I was stunned. "What?" "I bought a house. I thought you'd be happy for me." "Happy?" he practically shouted. "You knew your brother and his wife have been trying to buy a house for their family? How could you do this to them?" "My brother is 3 years older than me. He got married young and has 2 kids. Unlike me, he's never been great with money. He and his wife seem to always be leasing new cars or going on expensive vacations they can't really afford. They've been renting the same apartment for years, occasionally talking about buying a house someday, but never actually saving for it, as far as I knew." "I don't understand," I said, genuinely confused. "What does my buying a house have to do with them?" "We told them we'd help them get a house," my dad bellowed. "We were counting on you putting your savings toward their down payment. You're single. You don't need a whole house to yourself." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Wait, what? When was this decided? Nobody ever talked to me about this." "It was understood," my mom chimed in, having apparently taken the phone back. "Your brother has a family. They need the space. You're being incredibly selfish right now." My head was spinning. In all our family gatherings, in all the conversations about my future plans, not once had anyone mentioned that I was somehow expected to financially support my brother's family. Not once had anyone suggested that my years of careful saving weren't for my own benefit, but somehow earmarked for my brother. "That's insane," I said finally. "I've been saving for years for my own house. I never agreed to give that money to anyone else." "Well, you need to make this right," my father said back on the phone. "You need to either give them the down payment money or let them have the house." "Let them have the house?" I repeated incredulously. "The house that I just bought? With my money? That I'm moving into next week?" "They need it more than you do," my mom said. "They have children. Think about your niece and nephew." I was so shocked that I barely managed to mumble something about having to go before hanging up. I sat on the floor of my empty new living room, surrounded by packed boxes, and tried to process what had just happened. Before I could gather my thoughts, my phone buzzed with a text from my brother. "Thanks for screwing us over. Mom and Dad promised we'd have a house by the end of the year. My kids were counting on having their own rooms." I was still staring at this message in disbelief when another text came through, this one from my sister-in-law. "You've always been selfish, but this is a new low. Hope you enjoy your big empty house while your niece and nephew are crammed into a 1-bedroom apartment. Some aunt you are." I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. Had my entire family secretly decided that my money belonged to my brother? That my future was less important than his? I called my best friend, who was equally stunned. "That's the craziest thing I've ever heard," she said after I explained the situation. "They can't seriously expect you to give up your house." "Apparently they can," I replied. They seemed to think it was some unspoken agreement that I'd bankroll my brother's life. That's messed up, she said. What are you going to do? What indeed? I spent a sleepless night trying to figure out how I'd somehow become the villain in my own success story. The next morning, my parents called again. We've been thinking, my mom began, and we've come up with a solution. You can keep the house, but you need to let your brother and his family move in with you until they can find a place of their own. We'll all help with the mortgage. Absolutely not, I said firmly. I bought this house for myself. I'm not turning it into a communal family property. You're being ridiculous, my dad snapped. Family helps family. Your brother would do the same for you. Would he? I challenged. Because he's never offered to help me with anything. And neither have you, for that matter. I put myself through college while you paid for his. I saved for this house on my own while you've been enabling his poor financial decisions for years. There was a shocked silence on the other end of the line. How dare you, my mom finally said, her voice ice cold. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked. Name one thing in the last decade that you've done to help me succeed. They couldn't answer. Instead, they hung up. The next week was a nightmare. I tried to focus on moving into my new home, but I was constantly bombarded with texts and calls from various family members. My parents had apparently spread the word that I was hoarding a house that should rightfully belong to my brother's family, and distant relatives I barely spoke to were suddenly very concerned about my selfishness. My brother showed up at my house unannounced one evening, his wife and kids in tow. We thought we'd check out our future home, he said with a smirk as he tried to push past me into the entryway. Hacko, I blocked the door. This is not your future home. This is my home. You need to leave. Come on, don't be like that, he said. The kids want to see their rooms. They don't have rooms here, I said firmly. You need to leave now, or I'm calling the police. My sister-in-law gasped dramatically. You'd call the police on your own family? On your niece and nephew? She turned to the kids. See how mean your aunt is? She doesn't want to share her big house with you. I felt manipulated and ambushed. This is inappropriate and you know it, I told them. Please leave now. They eventually did, but not before my brother hissed. This isn't over. Mom and Dad are on our side, and you know they always get their way. Unfortunately, he was right about that. My parents had a long history of getting what they wanted, through a combination of guilt-tripping, emotional manipulation, and sheer persistence. I'd spent most of my childhood and young adult life trying to please them, bending over backward to earn their approval while watching them lavish praise and support on my brother for doing the bare minimum. But this was different. This was my home, my independence, my future. I wasn't going to give that up. Loss. The harassment continued for days. My parents called my workplace. They showed up at my house at odd hours. They sent flying monkeys in the form of aunts, uncles, and family friends to reason with me. My brother started telling people I had promised him the house, and then reneged, making me look like the villain in his narrative. I finally reached out to a close cousin who had distanced herself from the family years ago. I'm not surprised, she said when I explained the situation. Your parents have always favored your brother, and they've never respected your boundaries. But this is a new level of entitlement, even for them. What should I do? I asked her, desperate for advice from someone who understood the family dynamics. Document everything, she said immediately. Every text, every email, every unannounced visit. You might need it if things escalate further. And consider talking to a lawyer about a cease and desist if they keep harassing you. Taking her advice, I started keeping a detailed log of all interactions. I installed security cameras at my front and back doors. I saved screenshots of the increasingly hostile text messages from my brother and sister-in-law. I recorded phone calls after informing the callers they were being recorded, legal in my state. About 2 weeks into this nightmare, my parents showed up at my house with what they called paperwork. It was a crude, handwritten contract stating that I would sell them my house for the exact amount I had paid for it, with no consideration for the closing costs, inspection fees, or the money I'd already spent on minor repairs and updates. We're being more than fair, my dad said. You're getting all your money back. This isn't a legally binding document, I pointed out, and I'm not selling my house, not to you, not to my brother, not to anyone. You ungrateful brat, my mom hissed. After everything we've done for you, after all the sacrifices we've made. What sacrifices? I asked, genuinely curious what they thought they had sacrificed for me. They looked at each other, clearly struggling to come up with examples. "We raised you," my dad finally said. "We put a roof over your head and food on the table." "That's called the bare minimum of parenting," I replied, "and I'm grateful for it, but it doesn't entitle you to control my adult life or my finances." They left in a huff, but not before my dad threatened, "You'll regret this. One way or another, we're going to make this right for your brother." That threat was the final straw. The next day, I consulted with a lawyer about my options. She advised me to send a formal cease and desist letter, which would serve as official notice that their behavior was unwanted and potentially illegal if it continued. "But they're my family," I protested weakly. "Family or not, what they're doing is harassment," she said firmly. "You have the right to live peacefully in your own home without being constantly accosted by people making unreasonable demands." She drafted the letter, which outlined in clear terms that my parents, brother, and sister-in-law were to stop coming to my home uninvited, stop contacting my workplace, and cease making demands regarding my property. It stated that any further such behavior would be considered harassment and could result in legal action. I hesitated before sending it, wondering if I was overreacting or if it would only make things worse. But when my brother showed up at my house again, this time with a moving truck and several friends ready to, quote, "help move some furniture in for the kids," I knew I had to act. I refused to let them in, standing my ground despite my brother's attempts to push past me. When one of his friends tried to force his way in, I called the police. By the time the officers arrived, my brother and his crew had retreated to the sidewalk, where they were loudly discussing how unreasonable and cruel I was being. The police officers took statements from both sides. My brother claimed I had verbally agreed to let him move in and was now breaking my promise. I showed the officers my deed to the house and explained the ongoing harassment. They advised my brother and his friends to leave the premises and told me to contact them again if there were further issues. That evening, I sent the cease and desist letters via certified mail to my parents and my brother. The letter to my brother was delivered the next day. The one to my parents was returned unopened. Instead of backing off, my parents escalated their campaign. They started contacting my friends, colleagues, and even clients, telling them that I was mentally unstable and making poor decisions. They implied that I had stolen money from them to buy my house. They told anyone who would listen that I was tearing the family apart out of pure selfishness. I was horrified and humiliated. My professional reputation, which I had worked so hard to build, was being threatened by my own parents. I called my lawyer again, almost in tears. "This is defamation," she said firmly. "They're making false statements about you that could harm your reputation and livelihood. We can take legal action." "I don't want to sue my parents," I said, feeling sick at the thought. "I understand," she replied, "but they're giving you very few options here. At minimum, we need to send another letter addressing these new allegations and making it clear that spreading falsehoods about you will have consequences." I agreed, and she drafted a second letter that specifically addressed the defamatory statements and demanded that they stop immediately. This time, I had the letters delivered by a process server to ensure they couldn't be ignored or returned. The night after the letters were delivered, my phone exploded with notifications. My parents and brother were livid. How dare I send some stranger to their homes with legal threats? How could I do this to my own family? Didn't I understand that family comes first? I didn't respond to any of these messages. Instead, I followed my lawyer's advice and continued documenting everything while maintaining radio silence. Then, 3 days later, something unexpected happened. My cousin called me. "Have you checked your email today?" she asked. "Not yet," I replied. "I've been trying to avoid technology as much as possible to avoid seeing more family drama." "You might want to check it," she said. "Your aunt sent a mass email to the entire extended family about your situation, but I don't think it had the effect she intended." I opened my email with trepidation and found the message from my aunt. It was a long, rambling screed about how I had abandoned my family values and was selfishly hoarding resources that my brother's family desperately needed. She detailed how my parents had always planned for me to help my brother buy a house, since he had more important things to focus on, like raising the next generation of our family. But the most revealing part came near the end. After all the financial help they've given him over the years, it's only fair that she contribute something to balance things out. Between paying for his college, helping with the down payment on his cars, covering his rent when he lost his job, and the loans they've given him that he hasn't been able to repay yet, they've spent well over $100,000 supporting him and his family. It's time she stepped up and did her part. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My parents had spent over $100,000 on my brother while I worked my way through college, lived with roommates to save money, drove the same old car for a decade, and scrimped and saved for my down payment. And now they expected me to balance things out by giving him my house? The email thread had dozens of replies. Surprisingly, not all of them were against me. Several family members expressed shock at the expectation that I would give up my house. A few pointed out that if my parents had spent that much supporting my brother already, perhaps the problem was with his financial habits, not with my unwillingness to help. One uncle even wrote, "Sounds like your son needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet instead of asking his sister to carry him." I forwarded the entire thread to my lawyer, who called me almost immediately. "This is a gift," she said. "Your aunt has essentially admitted in writing that your parents have financially favored your brother for years and are now trying to pressure you to give up your property to, quote, balance things out. This completely undermines their narrative." "What should I do with it?" I asked. "For now, nothing," she advised. "Let's see how they respond to being called out by other family members. But keep it as evidence in case we need it later." It wasn't long before my phone rang. It was my dad, and for the first time since this whole saga began, he sounded uncertain. "Your aunt shouldn't have sent that email," he said without preamble. "Why not?" I asked. "Because it made you look bad. Or because it told the truth." He was quiet for a moment. "We've always helped your brother because he needed it. You've always been so independent, so capable." "So I'm being punished for being responsible?" I asked. "While he's being rewarded for not being able to manage his money?" "It's not like that," he protested weakly. "It's exactly like that," I countered. "You've spent years bailing him out while I worked hard and saved. And now that I've achieved something on my own, you want to take it away from me and give it to him. How is that fair?" He didn't have an answer. "I want you to listen carefully," I continued, feeling stronger than I had in weeks. "This is my house. I bought it with my money. I am not selling it. I am not letting my brother move in. And I am not giving him my down payment. This harassment stops now, or I will take legal action not just for the harassment, but for the defamatory statements you've been making about me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "We just wanted what's best for the family," he finally said. "No, you wanted what's best for my brother. At my expense," I corrected him. "And that stops now." He mumbled something about needing to talk to my mom and hung up. The next day, I received a text from my brother. "Thanks for turning the family against us. Hope you're happy in your big house all alone." I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on settling into my new home, painting the walls colors I loved, setting up my home office, and slowly turning the house into a place that reflected my personality and taste. The harassment gradually tapered off as my parents and brother realized I wasn't going to cave to their demands. About a month after my aunt's revealing email, my mom reached out with what I guess she thought was an olive branch. "We've been thinking," she said, "and we understand that you want your independence. But we still think you should help your brother. Maybe you could co-sign a loan for him? Or let them stay with you just until they save up enough for their own place?" "No," I said simply. "I'm not financially entangling myself with him in any way." "But family helps family," she protested. "Where was that sentiment when I was working 2 jobs to pay for college?" I asked. "Or when I was living with 3 roommates to save money while you were paying my brother's rent?" She didn't have an answer for that either. 3 months after I moved in, my parents tried one last tactic. They invited me to Sunday dinner, something we used to do regularly before all this started. I was wary but decided to go, hoping we might be able to start rebuilding our relationship on more equal footing. I should have known better. When I arrived, my brother and sister-in-law were there with their kids, along with my aunt, the one who had sent the email, and my grandparents. It was an ambush, an intervention of sorts, where everyone took turns explaining why I should do the right thing and help my brother buy a house. I listened politely until everyone had said their piece. Then I stood up. "I appreciate you all sharing your thoughts," I said calmly, "but my decision is final. I worked hard for my house, and I'm keeping it. Brother needs to manage his own finances and save for his own home, just like I did. If you truly want to help him, maybe encourage him to be more responsible with money, instead of expecting me to bail him out." Then I walked out, ignoring the protests and recriminations behind me. As I drove home to my beautiful house that night, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For years, I had sought my family's approval and support, bending over backward to please them while they focused on my brother. But now, for the first time, I was standing up for myself and what I had earned. In the months that followed, my relationship with my parents and brother remained strained. They occasionally still tried to guilt me about not helping with the house, but the intensity had diminished. Some extended family members who had witnessed the whole saga began reaching out to me independently, often expressing admiration for how I had handled the situation. My cousin, the one who had distanced herself from the family years ago, became a close friend and ally. "They'll never change," she told me over coffee one day, "but you can change how you respond to them. And you did that beautifully." A year after I bought my house, I got a promotion at work that came with a significant raise. I decided to use part of it to finish my basement as a cozy entertainment space where I could host movie nights with friends. As I was showing my cousin the completed project, she laughed. "You know what the best revenge is?" she asked. "What?" "Living well," she said, gesturing around at my beautifully decorated home. "And you're doing that spectacularly." She was right. Despite my family's attempts to make me feel guilty and selfish for buying my own home, I had stood my ground. I had protected what was rightfully mine. And now, I was thriving in the life I had built for myself. My brother, meanwhile, was still renting the same apartment and leasing new cars he couldn't afford. My parents were still bailing him out regularly. Nothing had changed for them, except perhaps the realization that I was no longer available as a resource to be tapped for their benefit. But that wasn't quite the end of the story. About 18 months after I bought my house, I was sorting through some old paperwork when I found a folder of documents from my college days. Inside was something that made my blood run cold, a loan agreement with my parents' names on it. I vaguely remembered signing some papers during my freshman year when I was struggling to pay tuition. My parents had offered to help, and I had gratefully accepted, assuming it was, well, parental help. The document I was looking at now told a different story. It was a formal loan agreement stating that I had borrowed $20,000 from my parents at 8% interest, to be repaid starting 1 year after graduation. They had never once mentioned this loan in all the years since I'd graduated. Not once had they asked for a payment, or even referred to the money as anything other than help with college. I'd been operating under the assumption that while they had paid for my brother's education entirely, they had contributed a smaller amount to mine as a gift. I immediately called my lawyer. "This doesn't look right," she said after I sent her a scan of the document. "For one thing, the interest rate is unusually high for a family loan. And if they never requested payment or sent statements, it would be difficult for them to enforce this now, especially after so many years." "Do you think they forgot about it?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Given everything else you've told me about your family dynamics, I think it's more likely they were keeping it in their back pocket," she replied. "Possibly as leverage to use when they needed something from you." "Like my house," I said grimly. "Exactly. If you had agreed to their demands about the house, I wouldn't be surprised if this loan magically disappeared. But since you stood your ground, I'm concerned they might try to use this against you." She was right to be concerned. The very next day, I received a formal-looking letter from my parents. It stated that they were regretfully requesting repayment of the loan plus accumulated interest, which now totaled over $40,000 due to the high interest rate and years of non-payment. The letter concluded with a handwritten note from my mom. "If you're struggling to come up with the cash, we would consider forgiving the loan in exchange for you co-signing on a mortgage with your brother. We're just trying to find a solution that works for everyone." I felt sick. They had been holding this over my head for years, waiting for the right moment to use it. If I had known about this supposed debt, I might not have felt financially secure enough to buy my house in the first place. My lawyer was furious when I forwarded her the letter. "This is loan sharking disguised as parental support," she said. "And it's potentially fraudulent if they misrepresented the nature of the money when you were barely an adult." "What should I do?" I asked. "I think it's time we looked more closely at your financial history with your parents," she advised. "Bring me any documentation you have from your college years, bank statements, tax returns, anything that might show the true nature of this money." I spent the next week digging through old paperwork and requesting copies of bank statements from those years. What I found was illuminating. The $20,000 had been deposited in 4 installments of $5,000 each, one at the beginning of each school year. Crucially, on my tax returns from those years, my parents had claimed these as gifts, not loans. They had taken the gift tax exemption for them. School year. My lawyer was ecstatic. They can't have it both ways, she explained. Either it was a gift, as they reported to the IRS, or it was a loan, as they're claiming now. But it can't be both. She drafted a response letter, citing the tax records and firmly stating that the money had been a gift, as evidenced by both their tax filings and the fact that they had never mentioned repayment until now, nearly a decade later, and only after I had refused to give my brother my house. If they push this, she warned, they could be in trouble with the IRS for what amounts to tax fraud. They claimed these as gifts to get the tax benefit, and now they're trying to retroactively call them loans. I sent the letter, including copies of the relevant tax documents, by certified mail. Then I waited, half expecting another explosion of family drama. Instead, I received a terse text from my dad. We need to talk. In person, no lawyers. I agreed to meet them at a coffee shop, a public place where they couldn't make a scene. I brought copies of all the relevant documents, just in case. Had dread. My parents arrived looking somber. My dad spoke first. Your letter has put us in a difficult position, he said stiffly. You put yourselves in this position, I replied. You claimed those payments as gifts on your taxes. That's what they were. We were just trying to help you, my mom interjected. We always intended for that money to be paid back in some form, whether through actual repayment or through you helping your brother like we've discussed. That's not how gifts work, I said. And it's not how loans work either. You can't retroactively change the nature of the money because I wouldn't give my brother my house. My dad leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look, we're prepared to forget about the loan if you'll just help your brother get a house. That's all we're asking. It wasn't a loan, I repeated firmly. And I've already told you I'm not giving my brother my house or my down payment. I'm also not co-signing for him. His financial problems are not my responsibility. But he's family, my mom protested, her voice rising slightly. A few people at nearby tables glanced over. Yes, he is, I agreed. Which is why it's so disappointing that you've spent years enabling his financial irresponsibility while trying to take advantage of my financial responsibility. My dad's face darkened. We have never taken advantage of you. We've always treated you both equally. I couldn't help but laugh. Dad, that's demonstrably false. You paid for his entire college education while giving me a fraction of that amount, which you now claim was a loan. You've bailed him out of financial troubles repeatedly while expecting me to stand on my own. And now you're trying to pressure me into giving him my house. How is any of that equal treatment? They exchanged uncomfortable glances. My mom's eyes were getting watery, but I'd seen her tactical tears before and wasn't moved by them. I want to be very clear, I continued. Those college payments were gifts as you reported to the IRS. If you continue to claim they were loans or attempt to collect on them, my lawyer will report the discrepancy to the IRS, which could trigger an audit of your finances. My dad's face went pale. I suspected there might be other financial irregularities they wouldn't want discovered. You would do that to your own parents? My mom gasped. I don't want to, I said honestly. I would much rather we all move forward and rebuild our relationship on more truthful, equal terms. But I will not be financially manipulated or guilted into giving up what I've worked hard for. And what about your brother? My dad asked. Are you just going to let him struggle? He's not struggling because of me, I pointed out. He's struggling because of his own choices, and because you've enabled those choices instead of encouraging him to be more responsible. They had no response to that. After a moment of tense silence, my dad nodded tersely. Fine, we'll forget about the loan, but don't expect us to just forget how you've turned your back on your family. I haven't turned my back on anyone, I said. I'm just refusing to be taken advantage of. There's a difference. They left shortly after that, both looking defeated and angry. I sat alone at the table for a while, feeling a mix of emotions. Relief that the loan issue seemed resolved, sadness that our relationship had deteriorated to this point, but also a growing sense of confidence in my ability to stand up for myself. When I got home, I had a text from my brother. Mom and Dad told me about your meeting. Can't believe you threatened to report them to the IRS. You really are a selfish bitch. I didn't respond. There was no point engaging with his anger, especially when it was based on whatever distorted version of events my parents had shared with him. A week later, I received an unexpected email from my sister-in-law. Given our previous interactions, I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. I know we haven't been on good terms lately, she wrote, but I wanted to reach out privately. Your brother doesn't know I'm contacting you. Things have been tense between us since your parents told us they can't help us with a house anymore. They've been making excuses about their finances, but I suspect it's related to whatever happened between you all. I don't know the details, just that it involved money from your college days. I was surprised by her reaching out and unsure of her motives. Was this another manipulation tactic? I decided to respond cautiously. I'm sorry to hear you're having difficulties, I wrote back. My parents and I had a disagreement about the nature of some money they gave me during college. They reported it as gifts on their taxes, but recently tried to claim it was a loan that I need to repay. My lawyer advised me that this discrepancy could cause problems for them with the IRS if they pursue it. I didn't threaten to report them, but I did point out the potential consequences if they continued to pursue this contradictory claim. Her response came quickly. That makes more sense than what they told us. They made it sound like you were blackmailing them or something. They've been acting weird lately, very secretive about their finances. Your brother is panicking because they've always been our safety net. Something about her candor made me wonder if there was more to the story. Can I ask you something? I wrote. How much financial help have my parents been giving you over the years? There was a long pause before her next reply. A lot. More than I've been comfortable with, honestly. They pay half our rent every month. They bought both our cars. They cover all the kids' activities and most of their clothes and supplies. Whenever we've had an unexpected expense, they've covered it. Your brother has never wanted to cut back on our lifestyle, and your parents have always encouraged that. They've constantly told us not to worry about saving because they were taking care of everything. I was stunned by the extent of their financial dependence on my parents. No wonder my brother and sister-in-law had been so upset about the house. They'd been trained to expect my parents to provide everything for them. I've been trying to get your brother to be more financially responsible for years, she continued. But your parents undermine me at every turn. They tell him he deserves nice things and shouldn't have to struggle like they did. Meanwhile, I know they've told you the opposite, that you need to work hard and save. It was like puzzle pieces clicking into place. My parents hadn't just favored my brother, they had actively created a dynamic where he was dependent on them while I was expected to be independent. The question was why? I decided to dig deeper. Has my brother ever stood up to them or made major decisions without their input? I asked. Never, she replied. He runs everything by them first. He won't make a move without their approval. It drives me crazy, but it's been like that since before we got married. I thought it would change after we had kids, but it's only gotten worse. And there it was. My brother's dependence gave my parents control over his life. My independence threatened that control dynamic. When I bought a house on my own, I demonstrated that I didn't need them, couldn't be controlled by them, and that was unacceptable to them. Have they ever tried to control your lives in non-financial ways? I asked. All the time, she wrote. They have opinions on everything from how we raise the kids to where we go on vacation. Your brother always defers to them. I've been thinking about leaving him, to be honest. I can't live like this anymore, constantly under their thumb. I felt a sudden wave of sympathy for my sister-in-law. She hadn't been the driving force behind their entitlement, as I'd assumed. She was another victim of my parents' dysfunctional need for control. I'm sorry, I wrote. That sounds incredibly difficult. For what it's worth, I think you're right to want more independence. No one should have that much control over an adult's life. Thanks for understanding, she replied. I know we've been awful to you about the house. I got caught up in the narrative your parents created, that you owed us something. I see now that's not true. You worked hard for what you have. We need to do the same. This unexpected alliance with my sister-in-law gave me a new perspective on the family dynamics. It wasn't just about money or favoritism, it was about control. My parents had created a system where my brother was dependent and compliant, while I was self-sufficient but expected to contribute my resources to the family pool when demanded. Over the next few weeks, my sister-in-law and I continued our private correspondence. She shared more details about my parents' financial control over my brother's family and her growing desire to break free from it. I provided support and validation, sharing resources on financial independence and healthy boundaries. Then one day, she texted me urgently, "Can I come over? Alone. I need to show you something." I agreed, curious about what was so important it couldn't be shared electronically. She arrived looking nervous, clutching a file folder. "I found these in your parents' home office while we were over for dinner last night," she explained, spreading out several documents on my kitchen table. I went looking for a pen and found the drawer unlocked. I know I shouldn't have snooped, but something caught my eye. The documents were bank statements and financial records, many bearing my name. There were student loan statements, credit card applications, and even a mortgage pre-approval letter, all with what appeared to be my signature. But I had never seen these documents before. "I don't understand," I said. examining a credit card statement for an account I didn't recognize. These aren't mine. I think, she said hesitantly, your parents might have been using your identity. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Identity theft? By my own parents? It seemed unthinkable. And yet, looking at the evidence spread before me, it was hard to deny. Some of these dates are from when you were in college, she pointed out. Others are more recent. The mortgage pre-approval was from just before you bought your house. A horrible suspicion formed in my mind. They were trying to buy a house using my credit, I realized, for my brother. That's why they were so upset when I bought my own house. It ruined their plan. That's what I think too, she agreed. They've been talking about getting us a house for years, but they always had excuses for why it wasn't the right time. I think they were planning to use your credit to do it without your knowledge. I was reeling from this revelation. My parents hadn't just been trying to manipulate me into giving my house or down payment to my brother. They had been actively committing fraud using my identity. And they might have succeeded if I hadn't happened to buy a house when I did, potentially tying up my credit before they could use it. What are you going to do? My sister-in-law asked. It was a good question. What does one do when discovering their own parents have been committing identity theft? I called my lawyer again, explaining the situation and arranging to bring her the documents. This is serious, she said when we met. Identity theft is a federal crime, even when it's done by family members. Based on these documents, they've opened multiple credit accounts in your name, applied for loans, and potentially diverted your student loan funds. What are my options? I asked, still struggling to process the betrayal. You have several, she explained. You can report this to the police and press charges. You can report it to the credit bureaus as fraud, without involving law enforcement. Or you can confront your parents and try to handle it privately, though I wouldn't recommend that given their pattern of manipulation. I thought about it carefully. Part of me wanted to march straight to the police station. Another part hesitated at the thought of potentially sending my own parents to jail. Despite everything. Let's start with a credit freeze and full reports from all 3 bureaus, I decided. I need to know the full extent of what they've done before I decide how to proceed. The credit reports revealed even more accounts I hadn't known about, some still active, others closed. My identity had been used to open credit cards, take out personal loans, and even co-sign for my brother's car lease. No wonder they had been so confident in their financial support of him. They'd been using my credit to provide it. My lawyer helped me file fraud alerts and began the process of disputing the fraudulent accounts. She also drafted a letter to my parents outlining the evidence we had found and demanding an immediate cessation of any use of my personal information, along with written confirmation that they would pay off and close any remaining fraudulent accounts. This letter gives them a chance to make things right before we escalate to law enforcement, she explained. But make no mistake, what they've done is criminal, and you would be well within your rights to report them. I sent the letter by certified mail, then braced myself for the fallout. It wasn't long in coming. My phone rang less than an hour after the letter would have been delivered. What is the meaning of this? My dad demanded, his voice shaking with anger. How dare you accuse us of fraud? I have the documents, I said calmly. Credit cards, loans, applications, all with my forged signature. I have proof, Dad. The question is, what were you thinking? We were trying to help you build credit history, he blustered. Everything we did was for your benefit. No, I said firmly. That's a lie. You used my identity to finance my brother's lifestyle and were planning to buy him a house using my credit. That's why you were so upset when I bought my own place. It ruined your plan. There was a telling silence on the other end of the line. You've left me with no choice but to report this, I continued. Unless you comply with all the requirements in the letter immediately. You would send your own parents to jail? He asked incredulously. You were willing to saddle me with debt and potentially ruin my financial future, I countered. What you did is a crime, Dad. Multiple crimes, actually. Identity theft, forgery, fraud. The only reason I'm giving you a chance to make it right is because you're my parents. But make no mistake, if you don't fix this, I will press charges. Another silence then. What exactly do you want us to do? It's all in the letter, I said. Pay off and close all fraudulent accounts. Provide me with written confirmation. And never, ever use my personal information again for any reason. And if we do this, you won't go to the police? He asked. If you comply fully and immediately, I won't press charges, I confirmed. But this is your only chance. And if I discover any more accounts or any further identity theft in the future, all bets are off. He agreed, his voice subdued in a way I'd never heard before. For once, he seemed to understand the gravity of the situation and the precariousness of his position. Over the next 2 weeks, my parents worked frantically to close the fraudulent accounts. They had to cash out some investments to pay off the outstanding balances, which totaled over $30,000. My lawyer verified each closing and payment, ensuring everything was properly documented. Once the immediate financial issues were resolved, I had my parents sign a formal agreement acknowledging what they had done and promising never to use my personal information again. The agreement included stipulations that if they violated this promise, I would pursue criminal charges and they would be responsible for all legal fees and any financial damages. My brother was livid when he discovered what had happened, not because our parents had committed fraud, but because their financial support was suddenly curtailed as they scrambled to pay off the fraudulent debts. "You've ruined everything," he texted me. "We were finally going to get a house, and you had to mess it all up with your selfish demands." I didn't bother responding. His reaction only confirmed my suspicion that he had known about and benefited from our parents' fraudulent activities all along. His anger wasn't worth my energy anymore. My sister-in-law, on the other hand, was quietly supportive. "This needed to happen," she told me during one of our now regular coffee meetups. "It's painful right now, but in the long run, it's better for everyone to live in reality instead of this financial fantasy your parents created." She was right, though the transition to reality proved difficult for my family. With the fraudulent accounts closed and my credit locked down tight, my parents suddenly had far less financial flexibility. They had to explain to my brother that they could no longer support his lifestyle, which led to explosive arguments and accusations. According to my sister-in-law, my brother was in complete denial. "He keeps saying they'll figure something out, that they always do," she told me. "He refuses to downsize or cut expenses. He doesn't understand that the magic money tree has been chopped down." My parents tried to repair the situation with my brother by revealing the full truth, which backfired spectacularly. Rather than being horrified that they had committed identity theft, he was angry they'd been caught. My sister-in-law recorded part of the conversation on her phone and played it for me during one of our meetups. "How could you let her find out?" my brother's voice demanded. "You promised you'd handle everything for the house." "We didn't think she'd buy her own place so soon," my dad replied defensively. "And then your aunt's email exposed the financial help we've given you, which made her suspicious." "So you just rolled over when she threatened you?" my brother sneered. "I thought you had a plan for this." It was clear from the recording that my brother had been fully aware of the identity theft. He hadn't just benefited from it unknowingly. He had been an active participant in the scheme. My sister-in-law looked miserable as the recording played. "I'm filing for divorce," she said quietly, after stopping the playback. "I can't be married to someone who would steal from his own sister and see nothing wrong with it. I've already found an apartment. The kids and I are moving out next week while he's on his business trip." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry it's come to this. Are you going to be okay financially?" She nodded. "I've been secretly saving for almost a year. I took a part-time job that your brother and your parents don't know about. The money went straight into an account they can't access. It's not much, but it's enough to get us set up somewhere simpler. Plus, I'll be getting child support." In the weeks that followed, the family dynamic continued to shift dramatically. My sister-in-law moved out with the kids as planned, leaving my brother stunned and furious. He immediately turned to our parents for help, expecting them to pay for his suddenly increased expenses and legal fees for the divorce. But they had already depleted a significant portion of their savings to close the fraudulent accounts, and their financial situation wasn't what it once was. For the first time in his adult life, my brother was facing real financial consequences. He had to downsize from his luxury apartment to a much smaller one. He had to trade in his leased luxury car for an older, used model. He had to learn to budget and prioritize expenses. And he was not adjusting well. "He calls me crying almost every day," my sister-in-law reported during one of our now weekly coffee dates. "He keeps saying he doesn't know how to live like this, that it's not fair, that I abandoned him when he needed me most. He doesn't seem to understand that this is how most people live, within their actual means." 6 months after I discovered the identity theft, I received an unexpected email from my mom. It was the first direct communication we'd had since the legal agreement was signed. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me," she wrote, "but I felt I should reach out. Your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking about our behavior, and the harm we've caused. We've started seeing a therapist together to understand why we created such an unhealthy dynamic in our family. I was skeptical but somewhat hopeful. If they were genuinely seeking help and insight, perhaps there was a chance for some kind of healthier relationship in the future. Our therapist has helped us see how we enabled your brother's dependency while simultaneously resenting your independence, she continued. We pushed you away with our expectations and demands, when we should have been celebrating your accomplishments and responsibility. So far, it sounded promising. But I remained cautious, waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're writing to ask if you would consider attending a family therapy session with us. Not right away, but perhaps when you feel ready. We understand if you're not interested, and we won't pressure you. We just wanted you to know that we're trying to be better and would eventually like to repair our relationship, if possible. There was no mention of my brother attending these sessions, which was probably wise. I wasn't ready to forgive him, and I wasn't sure I ever would be. But my parents? That was more complicated. They had done terrible things, but they were still my parents, and a small part of me still wanted a relationship with them, if it could be healthy and respectful. I discussed the email with my own therapist, whom I had started seeing shortly after discovering the identity theft. Processing the betrayal and setting proper boundaries was an ongoing journey. What do you want from a relationship with your parents at this point? My therapist asked. I want them to respect my boundaries, I said after thinking about it. I want them to take responsibility for what they did without excuses or justifications. I want them to treat me as an equal adult, not as a resource for my brother or an extension of themselves. Those are reasonable desires, she agreed. The question is whether they're capable of meeting them. Their email suggests they might be moving in that direction, but it's too soon to know for sure. Would attending a therapy session with them help you determine that? I decided it would. I responded to my mom's email, agreeing to a joint therapy session, but with several conditions. It would be with their current therapist, whom they had already been seeing for a while. I would speak with the therapist privately beforehand, and my brother would not be involved at this stage. They agreed to all my conditions, and a month later, I found myself sitting in a therapist's office with my parents for the first time. I had already spoken with their therapist by phone and felt reasonably confident that she understood the gravity of what had happened and wasn't simply taking their side. The session was intense, but productive. My parents had indeed been doing the work of examining their behavior and its impacts. With the therapist's guidance, they took turns acknowledging specific harmful actions without deflecting or making excuses. We violated your trust and your financial autonomy, my dad said, his voice shaking slightly. We prioritized your brother's desires over your basic rights. There's no justification for what we did. We treated you as an extension of ourselves rather than as your own person, my mom added. We resented your independence because it meant we couldn't control you the way we controlled your brother. Each admission was painful but validating. For perhaps the first time in my life, my parents were seeing me clearly and taking responsibility for how they had treated me. I want you to know, my dad said near the end of the session, that we've made significant changes in how we interact with your brother too. We're no longer providing financial support beyond helping with the kid's necessities. We're trying to encourage him to stand on his own feet, though it's not going well. He's very angry with us, my mom explained. He feels abandoned and betrayed. He doesn't understand why everything has changed. That's not my problem, I said firmly. I'm not responsible for his feelings or his financial situation, and I'm not ready to have him in my life again, possibly ever. They nodded, accepting this boundary without argument. It was a small thing, but significant. As we wrapped up the session, the therapist asked if I'd be willing to continue joint therapy on a monthly basis. I agreed, with the understanding that I could stop at any time if I felt it wasn't productive or if my parents reverted to old patterns. Over the next several months, our joint therapy sessions continued, supplemented by their individual therapy and my own. Slowly, tentatively, we began rebuilding a relationship on new terms. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and difficult moments. Old patterns would emerge, and we'd have to address them directly. But there was progress, genuine progress, that I hadn't thought possible a year earlier. My brother remained estranged from me, and increasingly distant from our parents as they maintained their boundary around financial support. His divorce was finalized, with my sister-in-law getting primary custody of the kids and child support that stretched his limited budget even further. He's had to get a second job, my sister-in-law told me during one of our regular coffee dates. It's actually good for him, though he doesn't see it that way. The kids and I are doing well in our new place. It's small, but it's peaceful. No more walking on eggshells around his moods or our finances. She had become an unexpected friend through all of this, one of the few positive outcomes of the whole ordeal. We had both escaped the dysfunctional family system in our own ways, and were supporting each other through the aftermath. As the one-year anniversary of my house purchase approached, I decided to host a small housewarming party. I had been so consumed by the family drama that I'd never properly celebrated my home. I invited close friends, my sister-in-law and the kids, and, after some consideration, my parents. My mom called after receiving the invitation. "Are you sure you want us there?" she asked hesitantly. "We don't want to make you uncomfortable in your own home." "I'm sure," I said. "We've made progress. I think it's time you saw the place I've created for myself, on my terms this time." The party was on a sunny Saturday afternoon. I had spent the previous weeks putting the finishing touches on my home, painting the last room and finally hanging all my artwork. The backyard was landscaped with a small garden and a patio, where I'd set up tables and chairs for the occasion. My parents arrived exactly on time, bearing a small houseplant as a gift rather than the elaborate, over-the-top present they might have chosen in the past. They seemed nervous, taking in the home that had become such a point of contention a year ago. "It's lovely," my mom said sincerely, admiring the cozy living room with its built-in bookshelves that I'd installed myself. "You've done a wonderful job with it." My dad nodded in agreement. "It suits you perfectly. I can see why you love it so much." There was a touch of sadness in his voice, perhaps regret for how they had reacted to my purchase initially. But there was no hint of resentment or entitlement. They moved through my home as guests, respectful of my space and accomplishment. When my sister-in-law arrived with the kids, there was a moment of tension. My parents hadn't seen their grandchildren much since the divorce, and were clearly eager to connect with them. But my sister-in-law had established clear boundaries about their involvement, insisting that they not undermine her parenting or make promises to the kids that they couldn't keep. To their credit, my parents respected these boundaries during the party. They played with the kids when invited, stepped back when appropriate, and made no comments about the divorce or my brother's absence. It wasn't perfect, but it was civil and even warm at times. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself relaxing and genuinely enjoying the celebration. My home was filled with people who respected me and my choices. The drama and manipulation that had cast such a shadow over my home buying journey were absent, replaced by simple appreciation and connection. "I'm proud of you," my cousin told me as we stood in the kitchen refilling drink pitchers. "Not just for the house, but for how you've handled everything. You set boundaries when you needed to, demanded respect, and didn't back down, even when it was incredibly difficult." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. It's been a journey, that's for sure, but I think I've finally found my footing. Later, as the party was winding down, my dad approached me on the patio, where I was enjoying a quiet moment alone. "I owe you an apology," he said, sitting down beside me. "A real one. Not the kind I've given in therapy." I raised an eyebrow, curious but cautious. "When you bought this house, I wasn't just upset about your brother," he continued. "I was upset because you had achieved something significant without my help or input. It challenged my view of myself as the provider, the one who makes things happen for this family. I hadn't expected this level of self-awareness from him." "Dad." "No, please let me finish," he said gently. "My generation, men especially, we tied so much of our identity to being providers and decision-makers. When you succeeded completely independently of me, it forced me to confront my own insecurities about my role in your life." He looked around at the home I had created. "But seeing this place today, seeing how happy and fulfilled you are here, I realize that your independence isn't a rejection of me. It's the natural result of raising a capable, resourceful daughter." Tears prickled at the corners of my eyes. This was the acknowledgement I had always wanted from him, the recognition of my capability and autonomy. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "It means a lot." He nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Your mother and I are trying to do better. Not just with you, but with your brother too. It's harder with him because he doesn't want to change. He's still hoping we'll go back to how things were." "Will you?" I asked bluntly. He shook his head. "No. That system wasn't working for anyone. Not really. It kept your brother dependent and entitled. It pushed you away, and it turned us into people who would commit fraud against our own daughter." He looked at me directly. "I will regret that for the rest of my life." The raw honesty in his voice convinced me that, perhaps, real change was possible. Not overnight, and not without continued effort, but possible nonetheless. After the party, as I cleaned up with help from a few lingering friends, I reflected on the journey of the past year. What had started as a joyful milestone, buying my first home, had spiraled into a family crisis that exposed long-buried dysfunctions and led to painful but necessary transformations. My brother was still grappling with the consequences of his entitlement, learning the hard way that life without financial bailouts required significant adjustments. My parents were rebuilding their relationship with me on healthier terms while processing their role in creating the dysfunctional family dynamics. My sister-in-law and the kids were forging a new, more stable life independent of the chaos. And I was standing firmly in my power, comfortable in my home, and confident in my boundaries. Mome ete. The house that had become a battleground was now truly mine, in every sense. Not just legally and financially, but emotionally too. No one was trying to take it from me or use it to control me. It was my sanctuary, my achievement, my home. As I washed the last of the glasses and put them away, I smiled at the quiet contentment I felt. The revenge wasn't in anyone's punishment or downfall. It was in breaking free from the toxic patterns that had constrained us all. It was in claiming my right to my own life and success. It was in standing up for myself and building the life I deserved, on my own terms. 6 months after the housewarming party, I hosted a small dinner to celebrate paying off the last of my student loans. My parents came, bringing a bottle of champagne to mark the occasion. My sister-in-law and the kids joined us, the children excited to see their grandparents in the controlled, healthy environment we had established. My brother didn't come. He had moved to a different city for work, still nursing his resentment and unwilling to accept the new family dynamic. Perhaps someday he would be ready to join us on these new terms. Perhaps not. Either way, life would continue. As we raised our glasses in a toast, my mom caught my eye with a look of genuine pride. To financial independence, she said, achieved through hard work and perseverance. And to healthy boundaries, my dad added. May we continue to respect them. I smiled, clinking my glass against theirs. To new beginnings, I said. And to homes built on solid foundations. In the warm light of my dining room, surrounded by people who now respected my autonomy and celebrated my success, I felt the last pieces of the old resentment falling away. The house that had once been a symbol of family conflict had become a place of healing and growth, and I had become a stronger, more confident version of myself through defending it. That, in the end, was the most satisfying outcome of all. Update, 3 years later. It's been over 3 years since I bought my house and unleashed a family crisis none of us saw coming. A lot of people have been asking for an update, so here goes. My relationship with my parents has continued to improve, though it's still a work in progress. We stopped formal family therapy after about 18 months, but still have occasional check-in sessions when needed. They've remained committed to respecting my boundaries, and have even started apologizing immediately when they slip into old patterns, rather than getting defensive. The biggest change has been in their relationship with money and status. Last year, they downsized from their large suburban home to a modest condo, using the proceeds to finally build a proper retirement fund. My dad fully retired, and my mom switched to part-time work. They seem happier with this simpler lifestyle than they were constantly trying to maintain appearances. My brother has remained mostly estranged from me, though we've had limited contact at a few family events. He's still struggling financially and emotionally, but there have been small signs of growth. He recently reached out to apologize for his role in the identity theft scheme, though the apology was somewhat undermined by his subsequent request to borrow money. I declined the loan but appreciated the partial step forward. My sister-in-law and I have remained close. She's thriving as a single mom and recently completed a degree in accounting, something she'd always wanted to pursue but had postponed during her marriage. She and the kids are doing well in their apartment, and she started dating again, this time with a much healthier perspective on finances and independence. As for me, my career has continued to flourish. I was promoted to creative director at my firm last year, which came with a significant salary increase. I've used the extra income to accelerate payments on my mortgage and build my investments rather than upgrading my lifestyle dramatically. The house itself has been a source of joy and stability. I've completed most of the renovations I wanted to do, transforming it from a dated property into a modern, comfortable home that perfectly suits my needs. The tacky 90s kitchen is now a sleek, functional space where I love to cook and entertain. The previously unfinished basement is now a cozy media room and guest suite. Last month, I had the house reappraised as part of a refinance to take advantage of lower interest rates. Its value has increased by nearly 30% since I bought it, partially due to the renovations, but mostly due to the continued strength of the housing market in my area. My parents were genuinely happy for me when I shared this news, with no hint of the entitlement they might have shown in the past. "You made an excellent investment," my dad said simply. "You should be proud." Perhaps the most satisfying development came just a few weeks ago. My brother finally found a house he could actually afford in his new city. It's smaller and less luxurious than what he'd originally envisioned, but it's his, purchased with his own salary and a modest down payment he saved himself. He sent me a photo with the keys, mirroring the social media post I'd made 3 years earlier that had sparked the entire saga. "Congrats," I texted back. "It feels good, doesn't it, to earn something yourself?" "Yeah," he replied after a long pause. "It actually does." It was a small exchange, but it felt like a significant moment. Perhaps he was finally learning what I had known all along, that the true satisfaction of homeownership comes not just from having a place to call your own, but from knowing you earned it through your own hard work and determination. As for the question many of you asked in response to my original post, no, I don't regret standing my ground. By refusing to give in to my family's demands, I not only protected my own financial future, but ultimately forced a reckoning that was long overdue. The process was painful, but the outcome has been healing for almost everyone involved. Data prima. The house that became a battleground is now simply my beloved home, and the family that once tried to claim it has been transformed into something healthier and more honest than I ever thought possible. Sometimes, standing up for yourself isn't just about winning the immediate battle. It's about creating the possibility for everyone to evolve into better versions of themselves. That's the real victory, and it's one I'm grateful for every day as I walk through the front door of the home that is undeniably, unquestionably mine. Anyway, thank you for watching.